Dust swirled like a mournful hymn over Bitter Creek, Wyoming, 1878, settling into the warped boards of sagging saloons and the hollow hearts of a town. Worn thin by time, the wind carried no mercy, only the acrid scent of dry earth and the ghosts of promises long broken. In the shadow of the rusty Spur Saloon, Leila Mayhew, 18, lay crumpled in the dirt, her blue calico dress torn at the hem, stained with blood that seeped from her twisted leg. Her auburn hair, matted with sweat and grime, clung to her pale cheeks, framing hazel eyes that burned with a defiance no pain could snuff out. Bruises bloomed dark across her arms, raw and angry from a beating that had lasted until her voice fell silent, her breath rasped, shallow but stubborn, each inhale a quiet vow to endure. The townsfolk watched from a distance. Mrs. Granger, the mercantile owner, peered through dusty glass and turned away. The cooper's boy, wide-eyed, hid behind a rain barrel. Sheriff Cullen puffed his pipe on the boardwalk, gray eyes cold as the iron on his hip. Leila hadn't cried since her brother, Jonah, died last winter, and she wouldn't now. Even as the pain clawed her raw, Leila had arrived in Bitter Creek a year ago, her heart full of hope, riding beside Jonah, a gentle carpenter, whose hands crafted a wooden lark, its wings delicate as a whispered dream. He'd promised her a new start, away from Nebraska's sorrows. But fever stole him when the first frost hit, leaving her with their aunt and uncle, Ruth and Ezra Holt. Their kindness was a thin veneer, cracking under grief's weight. Ruth called her a burden, her voice sharp as a switch. Ezra accused her of stealing Jonah's tools: a chisel, a hammer, a silver clasp he likely sold at the saloon for whiskey. Last night, their rage boiled over in the barn, Ruth screaming of theft and disgrace, Ezra's fists heavy with liquor's fire. When Leila tripped on a splintered board, her ankle snapping with a sound like a rifle shot, they didn't pause. They dragged her to a buckboard, her dress catching on splinters, and dumped her at the saloon steps like a discarded rag. The town let her lie, the clouds above shielding her from the sun's cruel glare. But hope felt as distant as the snow-capped mountains on the horizon. A boot crunched in the dirt, slow and deliberate, cutting through the town's silence. A broad shadow fell over her, blocking the heat, offering a moment's reprieve. "You still breathin'?" a voice asked, low and rough as gravel, but woven with a warmth that didn't belong in Bitter Creek. Leila blinked, her hazel eyes meeting, deep brown ones in a weathered face, etched with lines of a hard life. Amos Reed, 40, a solitary trapper, crouched beside her, his leather duster creased with years of wind and work, gray beard flecked with dust, a faded brown hat pulled low over his brow. His hands, scarred from trapping and time, hovered gently, careful not to startle her. "I've got you," he said, his voice steady as a heartbeat. He slid one arm under her shoulders, another under her knees, lifting her with a gentleness that belied his rugged frame. Leila flinched, pain searing, through her leg like a branding iron, but his grip held firm, carrying her as if she weighed no more than the grief she bore. The scent of pine, gun oil, and cedar clung to him, his duster brushing her cheek. Coarse but grounding. Amos carried her past the saloon's swinging doors, where whiskey-soaked laughter fell silent, past the townsfolk whose eyes darted away, their whispers trailing like a bitter wine-crazy trapper. "Cursed girl." Sheriff Cullen stepped forward, pipe smoke curling like a warning. "Reed, you sure you want to take this on?" he asked, his voice low, almost reluctant. Amos didn't answer, his boots heavy on the creaking boardwalk, his stride unwavering through Main Street's dust. The town's murmurs grew sharper. He's lost his mind. She's trouble, but he paid them no mind, his brown eyes fixed ahead. Beyond the livery, a ridge rose, dotted with gnarled junipers and sagebrush swaying in the breeze. His cabin stood there, a squat, sturdy haven of weathered logs, its stone chimney trailing smoke like a quiet prayer against the fading light. Inside, Amos laid Leila on a narrow cot, its muslin sheets rough but clean, the faint scent of lye lingering. A stone hearth glowed, casting firelight across a sparse room. A wooden table, a single chair, a shelf with a worn almanac and a tin of coffee on the mantel. A wooden lark carving caught her eye, its wings poised as if ready to fly, stirring. A pang in her chest, Jonah had carved one just like it, a gift before the fever took him. "Name's Amos Reed," he said, fetching a tin basin and filling it with water from a pump. His brown eyes met hers, steady and kind, a faint scar on his cheek catching the light. "Rest now. You're safe here." He moved to the hearth, setting the water to boil, his hands practiced and sure. Lilla's gaze lingered on the lark, her heart heavy with memories of Jonah's laughter, now silenced. As Amos knelt to prepare a cloth for her wounds, a faint jingle broke the silent spurs, sharp and deliberate, echoing from the ridge outside. Someone had followed them, their shadow lurking in the dusk, and they weren't here to offer mercy. The Wyoming dust draped Amos Reed's cabin in a soft gray veil, 1878, its weathered logs glowing faintly under a sky heavy with clouds inside. The stone hearth cast a warm, flickering light across the sparse room, where Lila Mayhew, 18, lay. On a narrow cot, her blue calico dress folded neatly on a chair, replaced by a patched muslin nightgown borrowed from Amos's sparse stores. Her auburn hair, freed from its matted braid, spilled across the rough muslin pillow. Her hazel eyes half open, dulled by pain, but holding a spark of defiance. Her broken ankle, swollen and bruised, throbbed beneath a cedar andrawhide splint Amos had crafted with care. The wooden lark carving on the mantel caught the firelight, its delicate wings a haunting echo of her brother Jonah's gift. Carved before fever stole him last winter, the air carried the scent of wood smoke, boiled, herbs, and a faint trace of lye, wrapping the cabin in a fragile sanctuary against Bitter Creek's cold indifference. Amos, 40, moved with the quiet precision of a man accustomed to solitude. His leather duster hung by the door, revealing a faded gray cotton shirt tucked into worn trousers, sleeves rolled to his elbows. His gray beard, flecked with dust, framed a face etched with years of loss. His deep brown eyes steady as he stirred a pot of broth over the fire. Hours earlier, he'd set Lilla's ankle, her stifled scream and the sharp crack of bones still lingering in the air. She'd fainted then, waking now to the soft clink of a tin spoon against a bowl, the fire's warmth easing her trembling. "Drink." "This," Amos said, his voice low and rough, like wind over sagebrush, but woven with a warmth that felt foreign in this town. He handed her the broth, his scarred hands gentle, the faint scar on his cheek catching the firelight. Lila sipped slowly, the heat spreading through her chest, her hazel eyes meeting his with a flicker of gratitude she couldn't yet voice. He sat in a creaking wooden chair across from her, his brown hat resting on a small table beside a tattered almanac and a tin of coffee. The cabin was a study in simplicity. A single iron skillet hung by the hearth. A shelf held a worn Bible and a chipped mug, but it stood as a fortress against the cruelty of Ruth and Ezra Holt, Lila's aunt and uncle. "You don't owe me words," Amos said, stoking the fire, embers crackling softly. "But you're safe here, Lila." Her gaze drifted to the lark carving, her chest tightening with memories of Jonah's laughter, his calloused hands carving. Her sparrow before the fever took him. "My brother made one like that," she whispered, her voice fragile but clear, breaking the silence. "Called me Sparrow." "He's gone now," Amos nodded, his brown eyes softening, a shadow of shared loss crossing his face. "My daughter carved birds," he said, his voice quieter, almost a confession. "Lost her 5 winters back. She left that one." He gestured to the mantel, the lark a bridge between their griefs, its wings a silent promise of hope. Over the next 2 days, Amos tended her with unwavering care, changing bandages with steady hands, boiling water for compresses, offering bread and broth with a quiet insistence. He read aloud from the almanac, his voice a low rumble, recounting star charts and planting seasons, filling the cabin's silence with a rhythm that soothed Lila's pain. She listened, her hazel eyes tracing the ceiling beams, the ache in her ankle dulling with each passing hour. On the 3rd morning, she spoke again, her voice stronger, rooted. "Lila Mayhew," she said, meeting his eyes. Amos looked up from, sharpening his Bowie knife, its blade glinting in the firelight. "Good name," he said, nodding once, then returned to his task, the scrape of steel against stone, a steady cadence. By noon, he left a small gift by her caught a sprig of sagebrush, its silver-green leaves tied with twine, their faint scent sharp and grounding. "Why do you help me?" Leela asked, clutching the sage. Her hazel eyes searching his, Amos stirred his coffee, his brown eyes distant, gazing at the lark. "You look like someone the world forgot. Didn't sit right with me." The town's whispers slithered up the ridge like a venomous breeze. Bitter Creek buzzed with gossip. Lila's a thief. Amos has gone soft, Mrs. Granger told the preachers. Wife Leela had bewitched the trapper. The saloon keeper swore she'd stolen Jonah's silver clasp. The words stung, echoing Ruth and Ezra's accusations. Thief, burden, disgrace cutting deeper than Lila's bruises. She gripped the sagebrush, her resolve hardening, her hazel eyes flashing with a fire the town couldn't douse. As night fell, the firelight danced across the lark carving, casting soft shadows on the walls. Amos sat by the window, his knife sheathed, his brown eyes scanning the dark. A faint creak broke the silence, a loose board outside. To deliberate to be the wind's doing. He rose, his hand tightening on his knife, his silhouette tense against the frosted glass. Someone was out there, lurking in the shadows of the ridge, and their presence promised trouble. The Wyoming dawn crept over the ridge above Bitter Creek, 1878, painting the junipers in soft gold. The air sharp with pine and frost. Inside Amos Reed's cabin, the stone hearth glowed, its firelight dancing across weathered logs, casting warmth over Leela Mayhew, 18, who lay on a narrow cot, her patched muslin nightgown draped loosely, her blue calico dress folded nearby, its torn hem a reminder of her ordeal. Her auburn hair, now brushed smooth, was tied in a loose braid, her hazel eyes brighter, though pain lingered in their depths. Her broken ankle, bound in Amos's cedar and rawhide splint, ached less each day, the swelling fading to a dull bruise. The wooden lark carving on the mantel gleamed, its wings a mirror to the one her brother Jonah had carved, a tether to a life before loss. The cabin smelled of wood smoke, sage, and boiled coffee, a quiet haven shielding Leela from the town's cruel whispers. Amos, 40, moved with the steady rhythm of a man who'd lived alone too long. His leather duster hung by the door, his faded gray cotton shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing scarred forearms. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his deep brown eyes watchful as he sanded a pair of crutches crafted from oak, their surfaces smooth with pine sap and tied with rawhide. He'd tended Leela for days, his care unspoken but unwavering fresh. Bandages, warm broth, readings from a tattered almanac that filled the silence with tales of constellations and harvest moons. Leela watched him now, her hazel eyes tracing his deliberate movements, the faint scar on his cheek catching the morning light. "Time to try," Amos said, his voice low and steady, handing her the crutches. "Slow now, ain't no rush." Leela gripped the crutches, her hands trembling but determined. She pushed herself up, pain flaring through her ankle like a hot iron, but she gritted her teeth, her hazel eyes fierce. Amos stood close, his brown eyes calm, ready to catch her. She took a step, the crutches sinking slightly into the cabin's dirt floor, her nightgown brushing her knees. The pain was sharp, but the breath she drew after felt earned. A small victory. "Good," Amos said, nodding once, his voice a quiet anchor. She sank back onto the cot, exhausted but alive, her heart pounding with something new, not just survival, but defiance. Days passed in a gentle rhythm. Leela folded blankets, her fingers steadier each time, and peeled apples one-handed, their tart scent mixing with the cabin's warmth. Amos shared fragments of his past, his voice soft as he spoke of his daughter, Ellie, lost to childbirth 5 winters ago. A faded shawl hung behind the door, untouched, its blue weave catching the firelight. "She loved birds," he said, glancing at the lark carving, said they reminded her to fly. Lila's throat tightened, Jonah's voice echoing in her mind. "Sparrow, keep singing." She began to hum softly, a half-forgotten hymn from her childhood, her voice thin but growing roots, filling the cabin with a fragile melody. By the 5th morning, Leela stepped outside, crutches steady, the ridge's air crisp with frost and pine. The junipers swayed, the distant plains stretching under a pale sky. She hobbled to the creek, its water gurgling over stones, and stood alone, her auburn braid catching the breeze. The world felt vast, not hostile, for the first time since Jonah's death. Amos watched from the porch, his brown eyes quiet with pride, giving her the dignity of solitude. She returned, her cheeks flushed, a faint smile breaking through. The first since Bitter Creek had cast her out, but the town's whispers hadn't faded. Bitter Creek buzzed with venom. Lila's a thief. Amos is a fool. Mrs. Granger told the preacher Lila had cursed the trapper. The saloon keeper swore she'd stolen Jonah's silver clasp for spells. The gossip stung, echoing Ruth and Ezra Holt's accusations. But Lila's resolve hardened, her hazel eyes flashing. As dusk settled, a boy from town, no older than 10, left a basket of eggs at the gate, a scrawled note tucked inside, for the Sparrow Lady. Amos handed it to her, his expression unreadable. Lila's heart lifted, but the gesture felt fragile, like a truce that could break. As night fell, the firelight danced across the lark carving, and a faint clatter echoed outside a rifle's hammer. Cocked in the dark, Amos rose, his hand on his Bowie knife, his brown eyes narrowing. Someone was closing in on the cabin, and they weren't carrying eggs. The Wyoming sun hung low over Bitter Creek, 1878, casting long shadows across the ridge where Amos Reed's cabin stood. Its weathered logs bathed in amber light. Inside, the stone hearth flickered, warming the sparse room where Lila Mayhew, 18, sat on a narrow cot, her patched muslin nightgown loose, her blue calico dress folded nearby, its torn hem mended with rough stitches. Her auburn hair, tied in a neat braid, framed hazel eyes that burned with a growing resolve. Her broken ankle less swollen beneath Amos's cedar andrawhide splint. The wooden lark carving on the mantel gleamed, its wings a quiet echo of her brother Jonah's gift, a reminder of the hope she'd clung to since his death. The air smelled of pine, boiled coffee, and the faint sagebrush scent lingering from Amos's gift. A fragile sanctuary against the town's venomous whispers. Amos, 40, stood by the window, his leather duster draped over a chair, his faded gray cotton shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing scarred forearms from years of trapping. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his deep brown eyes scanning the ridge, a faint scar on his cheek catching the firelight. He'd spent days tending Lila fresh bandages, warm broth, readings from a tattered almanac about planting seasons, and star paths that filled the cabin's silence with a steady rhythm. Lila, now stronger, hobbled on oak crutches he'd crafted, her steps shaky but deliberate. "You're getting there," Amos said, his voice low and steady, as he handed her a tin mug of coffee. Lila met his brown eyes, her hazel ones softening. "Didn't think I'd walk again," she said, her voice clear, rooted. "You thought different." Their quiet rhythm was shattered by the clatter of hooves, sharp and deliberate, rolling up the ridge. Amos stiffened, his hand dropping to the Bowie knife at his belt, his brown eyes narrowing. Lila's heart raced, her grip tightening on the crutches. Outside, 3 figures emerged from the dust. Ruth and Ezra Holt, her aunt and uncle, with Sheriff Cullen trailing reluctantly behind. Ruth's face was pinched, her gray dress stiff with scorn. Ezra's eyes were red-rimmed, his stained vest straining, a pistol gleaming at his hip. Sheriff Cullen, pipe in hand, looked uneasy, his gray eyes darting. "Reed," Ezra bellowed, reining his horse. "We're here for our kin. She's got things don't belong to her." Jonah's clasp, his tools. Lila's chest tightened, the light cutting deep. Amos stepped onto the porch, his silhouette broad against the dusk. "She didn't steal nothin'," he said, his voice like iron. "You threw her out. I picked her up." Ruth leaned forward, her voice venomous. "She's a thief." Shame in Jonah's memory. Lila hobbled to the door, crutches steady, her hazel eyes blazing. "You beat me. Left me in the street like a dog," she said, her voice ringing. "I'm not yours to claim." Ezra's hand twitched toward his pistol, but Sheriff Cullen raised a hand. "No court order, Holt," he said, his voice low. "She stays if she wants." The townsfolk's whispers. Lila's cursed. Amos is mad echoed in Lila's mind, but she stood tall, her auburn braid catching the breeze. Amos's brown eyes met hers, a silent vow of protection. The Holts retreated, their horses kicking up dust, but Ruth's glare lingered, sharp as a blade. Sheriff Cullen tipped his hat to Amos, his expression torn, then followed. Leela sank onto the porch step, her hands trembling, but her resolve unbroken. Amos sat beside her, his duster brushing her shoulder, the scent of cedar grounding her. "You all right?" he asked, his voice soft. "Not yet," she said, her hazel eyes meeting his. "But I'm getting there." He nodded, his scar catching the fading light. That night, a storm rolled in, rain drumming the cabin's roof like distant hooves. Leela stood at the window, unafraid, her fingers tracing the lark carving's wings. Amos stoked the fire, his brown eyes watchful. A faint clatter broke the silence, a rifle's hammer. Cocked in the dark beyond the junipers, Amos rose, his knife drawn, his silhouette tense against the frosted glass. Someone was out there, closer now, and their intent was as sharp as the storm. The Wyoming dusk cloaked Bitter Creek in a restless haze, 1878. The ridge above glowing faintly under a sky streaked with storm clouds, heavy with the promise of rain. Amos Reed's cabin stood resolute, its weathered logs warmed by the hearth's flickering glow, but a tense undercurrent hung thick as smoke. Leela Mayhew, 18, sat on a narrow cot inside, her patched muslin nightgown loose, her blue calico dress, its torn hem mended, folded neatly on a chair. Her auburn braid was tight, framing hazel eyes that burned with a resolve forged through pain. Her broken ankle steadier beneath Amos's cedar andrawhide splint, though faint bruises lingered. The wooden lark carving on the mantel gleamed, its delicate wings a beacon of her brother Jonah's memory, a tether to hope amidst the town's venomous scorn. The air carried wood smoke, sage, and the sharp tang of approaching rain, but the cabin's sanctuary felt fragile under the weight of Bitter Creek's growing whispers. Amos, 40, stood by the door, his leather duster buttoned against the chill, his faded gray cotton shirt taut beneath, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing scarred forearms from years of trapping. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his deep brown eyes scanning the ridge through the frosted window, the faint scar on his cheek catching the firelight. He'd tended Leela for weeks, fresh bandages, warm broth, readings from a tattered almanac, about star paths and harvest moons, building a quiet trust that filled the cabin with life. Leela, now hobbling on oak crutches, had found her voice, her soft hymns weaving through the air like threads of resilience. But the peace shattered as hooves thundered up the ridge, heavy and deliberate, kicking up dust that swirled in the fading light. Amos gripped his rifle, his brown eyes hardening. "Stay back, Leela," he said, his voice low and steady, like a river before a storm. Leela's heart pounded, but she stood, crutches firm, her hazel eyes unyielding, ready to face whatever came outside. 3 riders emerged from the dusk. Ruth and Ezra Holt, Leela's cruel aunt and uncle, flanked by a stranger, a lean gunman in a black coat, his gray eyes cold as flint, a long rifle slung across his back. Ruth's gray dress was stiff with scorn, her pinched face twisted. Ezra's stained vest strained over his belly, his red-rimmed eyes glinting with whiskey-fueled rage. A pistol gleaming at his hip. "Reed," Ezra bellowed, reining his horse. "We're done talkin'. She's got Jonah's clasp. His tool's our claim." Leela stepped to the porch, crutches sinking into the soft dirt, her voice cutting through the air. "You took everything Jonah left. I've got nothing but my name, and you can't take that." Ruth sneered, her voice venomous. "Your name's a curse, girl, and you've shamed us all." Amos stood firm, rifle raised, his brown eyes like steel. "She stays. You leave, or you'll answer for it." A sharp scent pierced the air, smoke rising in thick curls from the barn behind the cabin. The gunman had slipped away, lighting the dry wood, flames licking hungrily, embers sparking into the dusk like angry stars. Leela's breath caught, her hazel eyes wide with shock, the barn's glow casting shadows across her pale face. Amos spun, but Ezra lunged, his pistol drawn, his red eyes wild. The gunman fired, the crack splitting the air, the bullet grazing Amos's side, blood blooming through his gray shirt, staining his duster. Amos didn't falter, firing back with deadly precision, his bullet dropping the gunman to the dirt, his black coat crumpling like a fallen crow. Leela, fueled by a fire she hadn't known she possessed, grabbed a hot iron poker from the porch, hurling it with both hands at Ruth's horse. It reared, throwing Ruth into the dust, her scream sharp as a blade. Ezra froze, His pistol wavering, his courage crumbling. The plot twist struck like a thunderclap. Reverend Tate, Bitter Creek's preacher, stepped from the shadows, his black frock coat pristine, his brown eyes cold with greed. "You should have given her up, Reed," he said, his voice smooth but venomous, revealing his collusion with the Holts. He'd been paid to claim Jonah's silver clasp, a family heirloom worth a fortune, hidden inside Lilla's lark carving. Entrusted to her by Jonah before his death, Lilla's heart sank. Jonah had confided in Tate, believing him a man of God, but greed had twisted his soul. "You betrayed him," Lila said, her voice steel, her hazel eyes blazing through the smoke. "You're no preacher." Tate's smile faltered, but his hand rested on a concealed revolver. Sheriff Cullen arrived, drawn by the barn's blaze, his gray eyes stern, shotgun raised, flanked by deputies and the blacksmith, their faces grim. "Tate, you're done," Cullen growled, his silver badge glinting. "Drop it." Deputies cuffed Ezra and Ruth, their protests drowned by the fire's roar. The townsfolk worked to douse the flames, buckets splashing, but the barn was lost, its embers glowing like a fading dream. Lila helped Amos to the cabin, her crutches steady, her hands trembling as she cleaned his wound, stitching his skin with care. "You saved me," she whispered, her hazel eyes locked on his. Amos shook his head, his scar catching the firelight. "You saved yourself, Lila. I just stood by you." The lark carving gleamed, its secret intact. As night fell, Lila's gaze fell on her carving, a faint glint catching her eye, the silver clasp, hidden within, shimmering in the firelight. Someone else knew it was there, and their shadow lingered on the ridge, watching with a purpose yet unseen. Spring's first light spilled over the ridge above Bitter Creek, Wyoming, 1878, weaving vibrant green into the junipers and sagebrush, the air alive with the scent of wildflowers. Creek water and fresh earth. Amos Reed's cabin stood resolute, its weathered logs softened by dawn's glow, the charred scar of the burned barn now a patch of blackened earth sprouting tender grass, a symbol of renewal. Lila Mayhew, 18, stood in the garden, her blue calico dress swaying gently, its mended hem catching the breeze, her auburn braid gleaming under the morning sun. Her hazel eyes shone with a quiet strength, her healed ankle bearing only a faint limp, a mark of survival, not defeat. In her hands, the wooden lark carving, a twin to her brother Jonah's gift, held the silver clasp, its intricate design a hidden treasure that had fueled the Holt's greed. And Reverend Tate's betrayal. The cabin's stone hearth glowed faintly. Inside, the air rich with sage, coffee, and the promise of a new season, a testament to the refuge Amos had offered. Amos, 40, worked nearby, mending a sagging fence with steady hands. His leather duster hung inside, his faded gray cotton shirt rolled to his elbows, revealing scarred forearms from years of trapping. His gray beard was neatly trimmed, his deep brown eyes warm with a pride he rarely spoke, the faint scar on his cheek softened by the golden light. Weeks had passed since the barn fire, since Sheriff Cullen and the townsfolk stopped Ruth, Ezra Holt, and Reverend Tate, now facing justice in a Laramie jail for their greed-driven plot. Lila had grown stronger, her hands steady as she planted seeds, carrots, beans, wildflowers in the garden, each one a vow to root herself in this place. Her steps were sure, the ache in her ankle only flaring when storms loomed, a quiet reminder of the night she was cast out by the Holts. Bitter Creek had changed, its venomous whispers fading into cautious respect. Mrs. Granger sent a basket of apples wrapped in a clean cloth. The blacksmith nodded respectfully when Lila passed the forge. Children left wildflowers at the gate, calling her Sparrow Lady with shy smiles. The silver clasp, revealed to Sheriff Cullen, was more than an heirloom. It concealed a land deed, etched with Jonah's careful hand, grounding a plot for a community well to sustain Bitter Creek's families through dry summers. Lila stood in the church, once Tate's domain, and shared Jonah's dream with the town, her voice steady, her hazel eyes unwavering. "My brother wanted this for your children, for a future," she said, holding the clasp high, its silver glinting. Amos stood at the back, his brown eyes gleaming with quiet pride, his nod her anchor in the crowded room. Their bond had deepened, not in grand declarations, but in the quiet rhythms of shared days, Leela stirring venison stew, her hymns filling the cabin with life, Amos carving a new lark, its wings sharper, more alive than the first. He spoke of his daughter, Ellie, lost to childbirth 5 winters ago, her blue shawl still hanging behind the door, its weave catching the firelight. Leela shared memories of Jonah's laughter, his call of sparrow as he carved by lantern light. One evening, under a sky streaked with pink, Leela danced barefoot in the clearing, a slow, lopsided spin, her calico dress swirling, her auburn braid loose. Amos watched from the porch, his knife paused mid-carve, a rare smile breaking through, faint but true. Later, he left a sprig of lilac by her cot, its purple petals soft as a vow. "Why do you stay?" she asked, her hazel eyes searching his. Amos looked at the lark on the mantel, his voice low. "You make the quiet worth hearin', Leela. Ain't had that in years." Years later, the community well stood at Bitter Creek's heart, its stone walls etched with a lark, a tribute to Jonah's dream. Leela taught the town's children to read, her auburn hair now streaked with silver, her lessons kind but firm, shaping futures in a one-room schoolhouse built on the deed's land. Amos tended their garden, his hands steady on the plow, their cabin a haven where firelight danced each night, the lark carving watching over them. The town thrived, its people bound by the well's promise, and Leela and Amos's bond became a quiet legend, a testament to justice, chosen family, and resilience forged through shared scars. One morning, Leela stood by the well, the lark carving in her hand, Amos beside her, his brown eyes warm. "We made it," she whispered, her hazel eyes bright with tears she didn't hide. He nodded, their hands brushing, the lark's wings catching the dawn's first light. "Still standin'," he said, his voice a promise, their shared silence full of a life rebuilt. The story reflects the Western spirit of 1870s Wyoming, where settlers built wells and schools to forge hope against harsh frontiers, showing that family is chosen through shared strength, not just blood. If this tale of courage and quiet love moved you, hit the like button and subscribe for more Old West stories. What legacy would you build for those you love? Share in the comments.